Now, we move to the next item on the agenda, which is the webinar on transforming learning experience using design thinking by Professor Dr. Zaidatun Tasir, Professor of Educational Technology, Faculty of Social Science and Humanities, FSSH, from the Universiti Teknologi, Malaysia. A little bit about Professor Dr. Zaidatun. She was the Dean of FSSH for the 2019 to 2022 academic year. She was also the chairperson of the Malaysian Deans of Graduate School Council, MIDEX, from 2016 to 2019. The Dean of the School of Graduate Studies at UTM from 2013 to 2019, and the leader of the SITE UTM Research Group. Personalized learning, learning analytics, online and mobile learning, Education 4.0, and online social learning are some of her areas of specialization. In 2019, she was named as one of the Malaysian top research scientists and the ACRI winner. Without further ado, I am pleased to invite Professor Dr. Zaidatun Tasir to begin the session.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Ms. Nurul Hafizah. First of all, thank you, IMU, International Learning, through the International Learning Resources Festivals, for inviting me to share some of my thought related to learning experience. And I will share my screen so that everybody can actually follow part of my presentation. Yeah, have been mentioned by our MC that before this, I was at the admin position as the Dean of the Faculty, as the Dean of the Graduate Schools. And Alhamdulillah, end of the September, my term as the Dean of the Faculty has been ended. And then, of course, I've been actually working 100% on teaching and learning, which is I love very much. So I have more times to focus on it. I believe everybody can see my slideshow screen. Is it correct? Or you are actually did not see my slideshow?
Yeah, we can see.
It's a slideshow, eh? It's a slideshow, isn't it? Because I have full screen in front of me, so that's why I need to ask that everybody get the correct screen. Okay. So what I'm going to share for today is about 4 topics, which is actually when we talk about transforming learning, we have to understand some moments of truth related to learning nowadays. We are in 2022. No longer in 1990 and 2000s, where during our times, totally learning was different. Then, of course, I will discuss a little bit on design thinking and learning experience and how to actually transforming learning experience using design thinking. Okay. Some moments of truth that whether we would like to accept it or not, but that is what happened nowadays around us with the students. I still remember I've been in academia since 1995, almost 27 years. And then, of course, when the first class that I taught is in 1995, and then it's quite sometimes at that moment I think in 2004, when I've been appointed as an academic administrator. Then the UTM has actually reduced a little bit my teaching load. And then I no longer, 2018, I'm no longer teaching the undergraduate students. I've been given postgraduate students, PhD courses, master courses at that moment. So from 2018 to 2022, so almost 14 years, I've been not teaching undergraduate courses. And then in 2022, before my term as a dean of the faculty ended, okay, after 15 years as an academic administrator, I requested at the faculty that saying that I went to see my head of department. I informed her that can she give me undergraduate courses, because I just want to get excited teaching the students at the undergraduate level. So some moments of truth that we need to understand We are different generation from what our students are now. Then I'm actually in the X generations. And then of course, we have to understand our student, which is actually Z generation. And coming couple of years, we're going to receive the Alpha generation student. Some moment of truth that we have to know is that the human attention span in 2012, second is actually the average of human attention span. Well, if compared to the goldfish, the 9-second span is for the attention span for the goldfish. And what is actually the attention span in 2022 today? It's actually only 8 seconds. I observe it a lot in my class when, as I did mention, this semester I start to teach undergraduate course again. Then I observe it a lot. I can see that my students, they actually play with the gadgets in the class. We have a high flex class at UTM, and then they prefer, some of them prefer online learning totally. Every week they ask me, WhatsApp me, Prof, tomorrow we're going to have online class or offline class. Then I mentioned them, it's going to be offline. We need to meet face to face because that is part of the rule of regulation at the university. But some of them say that why not we having an online? I say okay, let us going to have online after couples of weeks that we have made face to face and so on. So this is where you can see that the moments of truth that we have to accept the difference in terms of the average human attention span. Talking about Z generations, of course, the attention span is only 8 seconds. Z is actually those who are actually born in 1997 to 2012. As I think my students is actually belong to the Z generation. So it's only 8 seconds. So they're kind of distracted with all things around them. And sometimes you can see your student smile in your class while you're teaching, but they are not looking at you. They are looking at in their handphone and so on. In my class, I allowed them to do that because I believe I need to attract their attentions towards the learning activities, towards my teaching. If they actually smile towards their handphone, might be my teaching is not really attractive enough and so on. So this is where in my class they can say anything. They can just address me anything because I believe it's their class, not my class. Okay. And of course, some things that we have to remember, there is a study that been done in 2016, looking at, from the study, 91% of teachers, 85% of students agreed that they are overwhelming that creativity will be essential to their success. So 91% of teachers agree that the student must be creative enough, especially in today's world, so that they can survive in the working place, in any way they will join later on. And understanding technology is a key to prepare the Z generation, and they learn best through doing, creating things, experiencing the world hands-on and connecting. So this is where not only through online learning, but through face-to-face also, we need to plan our teaching and learning. At certain times, we focus on lecture. Lecture is important, and giving a lecture is important to attract their attention, also to give satisfaction to you as a lecturer. Then you need to plan it, how long that you will give a lecture, and next there will be an activities, and it's about learning. Learning is more important than teaching. Then, of course, 94% of teachers believe that Z will work in the career that haven't even been imagined yet. Okay, I have few nephews and nieces who actually first working with the government, Malaysian government, and then suddenly they just resign it. They say that it's not actually aligned with their interests, and they actually been a freelancer. A freelance, which is actually one of it, graduated with a master's degree, but she worked as a personal shopper, IKEA personal shopper. So she did it well. She can take care of her kid's 6 son, okay? Then she can get along, she can get her own ways of work and so on. So this is why sometimes we never imagine, okay? Our the Z generation, they will work in the career that we never thought that that will be a career in life. And of course, in terms of future skill framework, okay, creativity have been mentioned here. You can see that autonomy, personal agility, self-efficacies are the future skills that needed for the graduates. And how does the Z generation learn? They learn by doing this, by seeing and by listening. So that's why I did mention giving lecture is still important, because 12% of them learning from listening. Majority of them learning from doing, and some of them learning by seeing. We read articles and so on. That's why we need to make it varieties. And tools that they use in their life, especially for teaching and learning, and for others, they use Instagrams, Snapchat is actually the tools that really really used frequently by the Z generations, Photoshop for image editings, and iMovie for editing their movie if they would like to just to upload something, and so on. Of course, in Malaysia, TikTok is actually the important, not really important, the popular tools that used by the student. At the end of your class, usually student will say that, Prof, can we take a photo? Can we do something selfie? And then I would like to upload in TikTok. Okay. And sometimes I just say that, okay, let's us take a photo and so on. Okay. Another moment of truth that we have to know the nature of knowledge, not only the Z generations, their preferences, their thinkings, their attention span. Another things that we have to know is that the concept of knowledge nowadays. If you read an articles by Josh Simmons, traditionally, knowledge is actually in sequence. Actually, knowledge is not in sequence. Knowledge is actually in a connective ways of how certain knowledge connected with others. But then, of course, before this, we actually treat knowledge as sequence. That's why in our teaching and learning, our teaching process is more linear. But actually, knowledge is actually connected among each other. In real life, of course, yes, we actually can't escape on the conventional way of looking at a program curriculum. For example, we have program, we have core courses, some of elective courses, measuring and so on. That one is part of our MQA requirement. But then, of course, if you look at the reality of knowledge later on, when the students would like to use it in the real world, knowledge is actually connected among each other. You might going to think about having a curriculum, academic curriculum program that not actually divided by courses, not actually categorize the knowledge as a silo in terms of this course, one course, course A, course B, course C. Actually, knowledge is actually integrated among the courses. So this is why if you visited Temasek Polytechnic in Singapore, they are using a problem-based learning curriculum. They don't have a specific courses, but they actually transforming the courses into a problem. So this is where to show that in reality, knowledge is actually connected among each other, especially nowadays in 2022, because it's easily for us to just search it. We get information from YouTube, from blogs, from OER, from MOOCs, and so on. This is to show that the knowledge is actually a connective knowledge. And accessible domains of knowledge before this in the traditional course, we tend to focus on textbooks, syllabus, videos, lectures, and so on. But in reality nowadays, okay, the way that the students and any one of us, including ourselves, assess knowledge is that we can see that knowledge is actually the learners actually produce an artifact. Learners also can actually be a composer or creator of the knowledge, and they can just put it everything, and spaces of learning is no longer through our e-learning system, classroom, and so on. Spaces of learning is everything. And after COVID-19 pandemics, even the society of learning not only involves the lecturers, students, and also the administrators in the university, but is also involve parents, communities, and everybody's, because we can see it's even the industry, the technology tech players, and so on, because we are together. The spaces of learning is actually too huge nowadays, and this is where we need to grab this opportunity. And 21st century workers is looking at a person with a creative arts design, with a design thinking and creativity. So this is where the titles that have been suggested to me to share with all of you is actually a relevant titles where how we can use a design thinking to transform the learning experience. Okay, let us go to look at what is a design thinking. So as we know that it has been mentioned first by Simons in his first books, that design as a way of thinking. So we are considering design when people who works in the design discipline, when they design something, learners is going to be their the first attentions, the first step that they will do in designing something. So part of the design is looking at the ergonomics of the products that you design. And remember, as an instructor, when we design an instruction, when we design our student learning experience, we are the one who design, who craft the student learning experience. We have to know that the learning experience that we craft is actually really belong to the student. So we need to empower the student. And in designing the learning environment, we also have to think as a designer. Okay, this is where the design thinking take place when you design the learning experience. And design thinking has been popular, implemented by David Kelly and Tim Brown of IDEO, which is actually a company looking at design thinking in terms of producing products and promote very well about design thinking. And the evolutions of design thinking, we can see is that it's 1960. It's been there quite some times, but had been made popular in 1991 by IDEO, and also by there's a schools that actually reflecting a design thinking, the D schools at Harvard's. This is actually the thing. And design thinking is actually a mindset and approach to learning, which is actually through it, the student have to collaborate, they have to solve problem. So this is where in the middle of my talk, we're going to see that how we're going to implement design thinking to transform learning experience. And it's essentially an artful, experiential ways of thinking and doing, so that we can produce human beings that are more creative and innovative. And we have to know, and we have to make sure that they feel sense of ownership of the creation process. So this is where design thinking is actually will create very interesting and meaningful learning experience. This is actually the phases in a design thinking. You can see that it actually, this is the most commonly accepted models for design thinking at Stanford, which is actually there are 5 phases. It starts by empathize. This is where in empathize stage, we try to gain an empathetic understandings of the problem by using suitable research technique from the perspective of the student. So this is where I will share later on how can we use design thinking in our own learning, teaching and learning. And of course, stage 2 is where we define the user needs and problems. So we need to know what are the user needs and problems. These phases in design thinking not only can be used for us to craft student learning experience, also can be used in our real life applicables and problem. Next is edit. Edit is where you will create as many ideas that you can. You allow the students to create as many ideas as they can. Then they have to select the best idea. At the end of it, next is going to be prototype. They have to develop prototypes based on the selected best idea. And then after that, they have to test it, the prototype, so to make sure that the one that they develop is actually going to solve the real problems that they identify in define and empathize. So this is a very part of the popular phases of design thinking. Then if you look at the implementation of design thinking in teaching and learning in teaching. So what we can reflect is that at the stage of empathy, so we can actually, what we can do is that we can understand who are our students, what matters for them. We need to understand also the class schedule of our student. For example, my class is on Sunday. Johor is actually, Sunday is a working days for Johor. So my class is at 2 to 4 p.m. Imagine 2 to 4 p.m. after lunch hour. So of course, students, not only students, sometimes me, myself also might be feel tired and feel sleepy and so on after taking my lunch. So this is where I need to know actually the background of my student. What are the previous classes that they joined before entering my class and so on. So this is where we need to, in the stage of empathy, we need to understand the student very well. And then after that, of course, we define it, we get feedback, we reflect towards it, and then we try to throw as many ideas as we can to craft the learning experience of the students. Then we produce the teaching and learning activities. And this is actually prototyping, whether it's work or not, it depends at the testing stage. Then we enter our class and give the student activities, conduct what we plan for our teaching and learning. Then we're going to reflect back whether it works or not. Okay, so we need to understand also, for example, in my class, I have 30 students, so I need to know their background. I check the CGPA, I check they actually came from which background, whether they belong to B40, T20 or M40. So this is a part that I need to know, because if most of them is B40, might be is good during my class at 2 to 4, I bring a packet of small lunch to all of them, might be just what I call a bread to them, and so on. This is where part of it when you are actually at the empathy and define stage. And hopefully, I believe from the moments of truth that we really need this design thinking in our teaching and learning. And what are actually design thinking? I hope that by now we are convinced enough that design thinking is a way of approaching students' innovation challenge. Besides, it's also to challenge yourself to be innovative enough, but also you can transform it to the student activity so that the student will be more creative and innovative. And there are 3 pillars in design thinkings where we are looking for the intersection of the 3 main areas. What is the desirables from a human perspective? This is a part of user-centric design. Then, of course, what is the technically feasibility to do, which is feasibility part, and viability part, which is what is financially viable. So this is a part of the 3 pillars of design thinking. Okay, and of course, which I can summarize a little bit. Design thinking, you can see that it's a learner-centered, it's solving the right problem, okay, analyzing the system. And usually when you put a student in a design thinking activity, don't rush for solution. This is where you have to ask the student, don't rush for the solution. Usually challenges that we face in our class, I've been implemented problem-based learning since 2002 in my class. Usually the challenges that I faced during that time is that when I give a problem to the student in rush, they just give a solution. I say, no, you have to analyze it. You have to read articles. You have to be critical on it. You have to provide several solutions of it. There's not going to be one solution and so on. So in design thinking, similar processes happen. So don't rush for solution. Start small, try and error. This is actually the things that you inform your student so that they will experience. Learning actually by try and error, if you ask me, based on the psychological perspective, is actually will create more learning experience to the student. And learning lead to the way, and also the learner-centered design, which is actually the learners will drive the design process, and it's more towards on designing for learners. I still remember my co-supervisor when I did my PhD in 1999. My co-supervisor is actually Professor David Jonathan. Okay, he always says that he wrote an article about learners as a designer. It's very interesting approach where when we would like to focusing on producing or crafting student learning experience, learners must be the centered, and it's part of the components of design thinking. And there are 3 areas that we need to know to prepare our students with the complex world outside our university, which is actually the critical, systematic, creative thinking, which actually can be developed towards from design thinking, computational thinking, and system thinking. So this kind of thinking, 3 types of thinking, is very important for us to inculcate among our students. And with these, students will work with a data. They will actually have to create a digital solutions. This is the 3 thinking skills that are really important, and we focus today for design thinking. Okay, let us move to learning experience, because I would like to concentrate more on how to, so that we some of you get ideas how to actually transforming learning experience through design thinking. Learning experience. When we talk about learning experience, it's beyond the learning activities. It's actually planned or unplanned. Sometimes the learning experience can be unplanned. There's something that you plan it for others, and suddenly others take place, and so on. And it actually depends on setting and the context, and that transform the learner insight, support emotional growth. And also build knowledge, skill, and disposition. In learning, in teaching and learning, we have to make sure that students immerse in their own study. This is emotion is very important, so that they can care towards what they're going to learn. Okay, this is where the learning experience is involved emotion, is involved the socials, it involves their feelings, it involves their, maybe if you can ask them whether they're happy, whether they're frustrated, and so on. And this is part of it. And talking about the meaningful learning, these are the components of meaningful learning. To create a meaningful learning, according to psychological experts, it must be active, it must be constructive, it must be cooperative, it must be authentic. The activities must be authentic, and it must be intentional. So all these 5 elements are actually there in design thinking. So this is where design thinking can assist developing meaningful learning experience. And talking about online learning experience, this is where we need to have this element, so that students will feel they are in front of us, although we actually deliver our lecture online. We have to make sure the student active, interactive, the things that we present to them is authentic, and flexible is another factors, inclusive, diverse, and supportive. And talking about learning experience, these are the, what I call it, the elements. They need to be enjoyed. You have to give choices for the students to select, where design thinking is totally give options to the student. You have to give feedbacks. The activities must challenge them, so that it will create a learning experience. Okay, learning experience that really can create a very meaningful learning experience. The peer instruction is part of the elements of learning experience. So you cannot just claim that you already tackle student learning experience if you did not put the student working in groups. Remember, it must actually involve student working in groups. Okay, and of course, okay, the learning experience design is actually the things is the same practice as instructional design, but in reality, when you want to design the learning experience, it's actually beyond the instructional design domain. In learning experience, we are not looking at the instructional design part, we are looking at the cognitive part, we are looking at the user experience, experiential learning, and interaction design, and all other factors of learning experience design, okay, are there in the design thinking. Okay, so this is where design thinking is really can actually transforming student learning experience. And just a little bit comparing the instructional design and learning experience design, because remember, usually we design an instruction. Okay, when we design an instruction, we actually create the instructional experiences. But the one that we need to create nowadays is that the learning experience. This is where it's more on creating the learning experience that enable learners to be active, achieve desirable learning outcome. And design thinking is one of the tools for us to design student learning experience. And it's a way, learning experience design is a way of creating human-centered and goal-oriented learning. This is where design thinking is really related to learning experience design. Talking about learner-centered experience, elements that we need to consider in it is that the personality of students, learners, is the agency, the inquiry part, collaborations, and of course the critics, revision. This is a part that we need to put in the characteristics that we need to consider to concentrate on learner-centered experience. Collaboration is a part of it, authentic is a part of it. We essentially, when we give them the authentic learning activities, real life learning activities, then of course the student will actually excited to solve it, and they can see the importance of solving the cases, and they will actually feel excited. And usually authentic activities are actually ill-structured, not really structured, and this is where the design thinking can actually reflect the process. And of course, talking about learning experience design is not only looking at the technological part, how the learners interact with the technology, it also relates to social cultural and also pedagogicals, social cultural, how do they collaborate, and of course for the pedagogical part is how a learner learns and reach their goals. And in learning experience design, of course, no doubt content is a part, the important parts that we need to be in our mind when we design the learning experience. But when content is a part, we call it content is a king, we're not going to be the one who delivered the content. When we use a design thinking, or if we would like to create a learning experience, we actually must remember this is a content that we hope and we believe and we want the students to self-explore it, self-construct it. This is where we need to make sure that the activities that we give it to the student, the learning experience that we craft for the student, will make the student automatically they will explore the content by themselves. So this is where, instead of we give a teaching materials, one just teach them, we just put them in a situations, we give them notes where they can read, but they need to explore more. We set the environments of forums, emails, might be a little bit on activities. We channel them to certain YouTube video, we channel them to website and so on. So that will create meaningful learning experience. Sorry, where's my mouse? Okay. And of course, how to create, because we need to empower learners. When we create learning experience, we need to empower learners. So motivations to learn is important element. Access to a learning system, we have to prepare the learning system. We cannot just implementing design thinking to craft learning experience by just giving them, okay, I give you this problem, solve it. No, you have to set up the learning system. At UTM, we are using our e-learning system, which is actually through Moodle. So in that Moodle, what I did is that I set the setting up, I set the environment, the design thinking environments where they need to download some of the informations that I would like to give to them. The task is actually uploaded in the system. They have to browse into it, and they have also to upload some of the materials inside the system. So they will also have to formulate their own learning contents to be shared with others. And of course, the solution of the task or the problem that you give to the student, they need to upload it into the system. So you must have a learning system for them to navigate, for them to get access it. And of course, you have to give a personal result, although you put them in group work. Of course, each of them will be evaluated differently. And engaging learning contents, you have to put it, might be you just download some of the interesting video to trigger their learning so that they can understand the problem well. The learning outcome also is part of it. Okay, so we're done with the topic and the important part. Okay, let me look at our time. Yeah, we still have time to look at how to. Okay, how to actually. Okay, so let us try. I just want to ask everybody, might be all of you who joins Zoom today, can go to Slido, scan the QR code, and maybe we can respond. I can see some of you can respond. How do we design student learning experience? How do we design it? Because indirectly, might be all of you who entered Zoom today, you already might be part of design thinking process. But of course, today what we want to do is that what is totally a design thinking. So let me share the Slido so that everybody can actually start it. How do we design student learning experience? Can we take about maybe 1 or 2 minutes to answer this? Okay, so that I can see that some input from the audience. How do we design student learning experience? How do we design student learning activities? How do we put student in the environments where they will immerse in their own learning? Okay, anyone can respond? One is participant is typing. Okay, that's good. More will come, I think. Okay, let us look at, because all of us are expert in our own teaching and learning. Okay, I believe this happened to me personally. I experienced it after being in UTM almost 27 years. I sometimes feel bored with my own teaching. So this is where, by implementing design thinking, implementing other methods that similar with design thinking, I able actually to make myself happy, approaching another 5 years to retire. So I would like to be excited also in academia. I don't want to be something like not really motivated and so on. So this is where one of it is that I transform my own teaching and learning. And with that also, if you are using design thinking, your own teaching, learning, and crafting the learning experience of student, you can collect data on it. You can actually observe how students think, how students interact with their friends. With that, you can actually publish articles in prominent journals. Even you can actually join competition, any innovation competition at the ministry level. So let us see the result. Okay, how do we design, give tasks based on learning objective? Yeah, okay, by taking into consideration the different learning style. Yeah, my research is actually about personalized learning. I did my PhD related to personalized learning style. Minimize cognitive load. Yes. If you browse through the academic curriculums, when you observe, I'm not sure in IMU, but in UTM, students usually will register up to 16 to 18 credit per semester. Then if you convert to the student learning time, or in 1 week, the student have to enter or to join lecture, I think it's quite, let's say 16 credits, you time it with, let's say 1 hour for every credit is 1 hour credits. Then of course 16 hours a week. Then of course you have a student self-directed learning also, and so on. Okay, some of you say that using any level of instruction. Yeah, you can do that, but one is focused on teaching, but design thinking is more focused on learning based on their background. Okay, that's good response to all. Using Moodles at H5P, yes. Use gamifications as part of it. Okay, very good response to all. Thank you very much. Let us go next on how do we design. Okay, actually, when we talk about design thinking in education, where can we implement it? We can actually implement, because design thinking actually can enhance curriculum. It can enhance curriculum. Let's say you design your academic curriculum based on design thinking. So what you're going to do is that you will tie certain courses into together. It will be an integrated curriculum. If you implement design thinking in your curriculum, it will be integrated curriculum. It's no longer divided into you still have core courses and elective courses, but you have to make it's integrated among each other. So this is where, if you would like to use design thinking in the curriculum, if you want, design thinking also can be used in teaching and learning approach. I will show you later on, share some of my experience using it as a teaching and learning approach. It also can be used as a teacher training and support. We can actually train instructors or our lecturers through a design thinking models, process, and so on. Okay, so and of course, okay, this is where what we always did in our class. We have knowledge. We thought that we would like to transfer what we understand about this concept totally to student. This is where sometimes I make an analogy. I say that, okay, student, open your head or your brain. I bring it here in top of your head. I would like to give you this knowledge. If I can do that easily, the student will be expert like you and other lecturers or professors. But what happened is that we need to transform knowledge as an experience. And the tools that we can use is the engine that can help us is that through design thinking. Okay, one of you says that using 9 events of Gartner 9 event of instruction. Let us try to compare Gartner 9 event of instruction with design thinking. So this is a Gartner 9 event of instruction. It's a straightforward way. You gain the attention, you inform the learning of the objective. This is what I did also a couple of years before this. In 2000, 2001, I also used this kind of methods. But then in 2003, 2004, I actually embarked into problem-based learning, pedagogical-based learning, and then the part of it, design thinking, because I'm teacher programming courses. In my class programming courses, there will be a project. So I cannot just teach programming by just demonstrate to the student what is this code function of, and what is the purpose of having this. No, I have to give project to the student, and the design thinking is the best methods I experience it. Okay, you stimulate the recalls of prior learning, you present the stimulus, you provide learning guidance, you eliciting performance, you provide feedback, you assess the performance, and of course you enhance retention and transfer. But in design thinking, okay, if you look at the phases of design thinking, you have to actually not give the instruction. There will be no objective. You just give them problem. Then they have to empathize it, to look at the problem in terms of the needs of people that facing the problem. So if you give a programming task to develop, might be something like online pool. We are having PRU, isn't it? This end of this week. So online pools for those who actually cannot join what you call it, face-to-face polling station and so on. So how to develop an online pool application, because I'm teaching a programming course. So now is a good time if we can actually take the environments of having PRU now as part of why some online pool having problems, what should be increased, what should be considered in developing an application for online pool, and so on. Of course, security is one of the things that people are asking a lot. So if you teach something like C++ programming related to how to increase security in the system, so by giving this kind of task, the student will try to empathize it from the learners, from the user perspective, the online pool users. What are the important factors that they need to make sure the online pool tackle before they can actually believe an online pool. So this is part of it. So of course, define, and they will define the problem, they will ideate, through brainstorming everything, they will produce a prototype, they will test it, they will repeat, edit the prototype, and so on. If we do that, if we focusing on Gartner 9 event of instruction, so it's going to be passive learning. But if we're focusing on design thinking in teaching programming course, or in teaching any other course, then it will be active learning. Okay, because we put the student as a center point of the learning, of their own learning. In other words, that the popular ones that use in pedagogy is that learners is actually their agent of their own learning. Okay, there's a template for you if you would like to use it. This is produced by Marker Empire, very good templates if you want to implement design thinking in your class. Okay, that I believe it really helps you. A simple templates where you can see that what you should put in each phase of design thinking. And of course, tempered school design thinking process also, okay, this is another example. In Stanford, there is a design school, we call it as D school, design thinking school. So this is another explanations that to explain on what should be considered in each phase of design thinking. Okay, and of course, several perspectives of design thinking. Design thinking can be an instructional design process. Design thinking can be an approach in learning. Design thinking can be is active, it's versatile. It can be part of assessment method. Okay, what I did during COVID-19, I did not use proctoring. I also against proctoring because I trust my student. I trust my student in their own learning. I try to create the trust, because if you create the trust, you will see that the student will be responsible, and indirectly you already infuse ethics in your own teaching and learning. Never teach ethics by just telling the student, you have to be good, you have to be good in everybody, you have to be honest. Don't teach, we're not going to teach ethics like that. You have to put a position that the student have to consider integrity when producing the projects that given by you. They're not going to copy paste it. They have to produce using their own words and so on. So in a part of assessment methods, what I did in design thinking is that, since I'm teaching a programming course, so what I give to them is that I give a case when they need to interview someone. I give it about 2 days take-home exam that reflect a design thinking. They have to interview someone, and each student have to interview different people. So indirectly, that you will avoid plagiarism, isn't it? And then they have to do the project within 2 days. They have to program the application according to the result from the interview. Okay, let's look one by one. Design thinking as an instructional design. As for instructor, this is what we can do in each phase. We are replacing the instructional design models which had been used before this as part of the process that we develop our learning activities in our class. So if you use design thinking as instructional design, because it is beyond than instructional design, in the empathize space, we will conduct a research to understand the learner. We will define, we will identify the needs of the learner. We will try to design it, challenge the assumption, generate creative solution. And we have our teaching and learning activities, several teaching and learning activities, and try it. We're not sure whether it works or not. If you teach the same course in the following semester, then you can just edit it, and then you can just try to revise it and use it in the following semester. And this is where, when you compare it with the popular instructional design models, ADDIE models, okay, what I did is that when you compare it with the design thinking, okay, phases, the one that I put, I just add an additional is on the implementation part. So if you look at the phases of design thinking, it can reflect the instructional design steps, which is actually the one that I showed is in ADDIE. And of course, design thinking can be as a learning approach for the students. Okay, what you can do is that you give the project to the student. The student will went through these phases. In instructional design, when design thinking as an instructional design, you are the one who went through these 5 phases of design thinking. But design thinking as a learning approach, this is where you give us learning activities to the student. The student will go through these 5 phases of design thinking. The task that you give to them, they have to empathize it. They have to define the task. They have to idea. They have to throw in as many ideas that they want. They have to create a prototype. They need to test it. Okay, so this is where, if you would like to use it as a learning approach. And teaching design thinking, okay, how might you support your students? This is where you have to develop. Design thinking is a skill. It's a mindset. So of course, at first time when you implement it in your learning activities, or you, the one who try to use design thinking in designing your own instruction or learning activity, okay, you have to learn. So when you put it as a learning approach, you need to teach the student how to think as a designer, how to what to do in these 5 phases of design thinking. So you need to teach it, okay? And how do we set up a design thinking challenge? These are just some of the tips. First, in the first place, consider the who's going to be the target group. You have to know your target group. How can students come to the context? So who going to be the target group, that the task where the student need to refer? Okay, because you are actually developing the task, okay, because you want students to interact with people outside the class. It can be the vice chancellor. I never experienced it, but I heard one of my friends from the engineering faculty. So he developed an activities where the student need to set an appointment with vice chancellor, and he's quite lucky that vice chancellor want to give a cooperation, and vice chancellor says yes, why not, just ask your student to meet me about 30 minutes, they can interview me, and then I can just give everything. So this is where, if you teach subjects related to leadership in higher ed, might be you need to attach the student to the real persons, where they will know exactly the real information from the practitioner in terms of leadership problem and so on. And they need to define it. What you can see, the defined task, and this is where I think that the most important part of the problem. So you need to help the students to think what is the important part of the problem. And in IDIT, what we encourage the student, let the student work in team, produce as many ideas. If they only produce one idea, ours is more, can you produce it other, can it be better in other ways, and so on. You need to be trigger. You need to trigger their thinking. So you need to be a devil advocate in your class. And of course, prototypes. To ensure the student have the material required, you have to give a support. You have to might be expose them to the tools, some certain tools that they can use in designing something, in producing the prototype. Make sure the tool is so simple, because it's actually a class activities, and these activities can take place not only in 1 week within your class hour, it can be outside class hour also. And of course, that is how you do it, and then of course they can test it and so on. Okay, and then okay, the design thinking, as we know, this is actually the phases, and two approaches that really overlapping a little bit with design thinking is problem-based learning and project-based learning. Problem-based learning alone is not really covering 100% of design thinking. Same goes to project-based learning. But if you would like to use project-based learning and problem-based learning as part of design thinking, you can. But what you need to do is that by integrate a little bit design thinking element inside the problem-based learning and project-based learning. Let us go to the project-based learning. As we know that PGBL is a pedagogical framework and design thinking as a creative framework. So if we use project-based learning as part of the learning activities to reflect design thinking, so GBL will act as a pedagogical framework, while design thinking will act as a creative framework. So we have to combine it together. And how do we see, how can we map it? Actually, when we map design thinking with project-based learning, is actually you can see the similar process of the student go through when they are in a project-based learning. But you have to go beyond it, because design thinking is actually a non-linear process and not a linear process. What you can do also by showing some mapping how at the requirement project-based learning is actually where the student need to empathize, they need to define, ideate, and so on. So this is a mapping between project-based and design thinking. Another method is problem-based learning. Problem-based learning is a teaching methods that we know that the student learn from the problem. So if we would like to integrate problem-based learning with design thinking, we give the problem to the student that reflecting all the elements of problem-based learning, because you know in problem-based learning, the problem must be ill-structured, no single solution, Okay, it must be realistic, where the student need to solve the problem. If you can really create an authentic learning environment, like I mentioned, you can assign your student to go to see your vice chancellor to interview if your university having problems which is actually related to the skills and knowledge that you would like to teach in your class, then go for it. So as authentic as we can, and design thinking will be a methods to develop to promote creativity and innovation, because in problem-based learning, yeah, it tackle a little bit creativity, but not so much on innovation. So this is where the design thinking can take place in problem-based learning. Okay, if you already implement problem-based learning, just go beyond a little bit, just considering some step in design thinking in your problem-based learning. So this is a very good diagram to show in terms of how we can actually look at the pedagogy based on design thinking, where you can see it actually overlapping. You have the real world problem. And of course, if the thing is related to design thinking, it must be new, contemporary, and future issue. Okay, so that the student will experience it. Because in problem-based learning, real world problem might be the problem that have been took place 10 years ago. But in design thinking, it must be a contemporary and future issue. So this is where a little bit adjustment that you need to do if you already implemented problem-based learning in your class, if you want to inject design thinking. The mapping between the problem-based learning process and also the design-based learning, okay, you can see the differences and the similarity. If you need this when you start to collect data, do research, and to publish some papers related to it. Okay, and of course, the problem-based learning, when students engage in problem-based learning, they are doing this. They have to learn, they will learn the project management, how to manage their own team, how to make sure that the solution will be on time and so on. They will become the system thinker. They will become the designer. So this is a part where we can see that problem-based learning is actually overlapping with design thinking. And this is one example that design thinking for teaching international business, that you can use the step that being shared by the one who teach business courses. And I give just an example. Okay, so as we know, design thinking can enhance a lecture. It can support the implementation of active learning. It can develop and implement online inquiry project. It can scaffold the development of student attributes, as we know that we need to produce students with a holistic graduate attribute and so on. And design thinking is actually will result inculcate and enhance student problem solving, creative thinking, communication, soft skill, teamwork. Because if they cannot communicate, how come they're going to solve the given problem? And of course, it's sent as a capability. Design thinking pedagogy is actually sent as capability of building for everyone. It will develop the creative ability, explorative attitude, ethical mindset. They will actually develop also participatory approach towards world issue, where they can be professionals in collaborating with others and so on. And in reality, what you can do is that this is where the student learn, okay, where you know that student is not only depending on your instruction, they can just easily get everything. So this is where you need to put the student in the phases of design thinking, so that it will create learning experience that very interesting and meaningful. And of course, what's next? The learning experience design. Learning experience design is go beyond than the conventional learning experience. Through the learning experience design, where we use technology, we can do the learning analytics behind it. We can record or analyzing this learner data. We can even predict the learning activities, the learning steps of the students who got A in our class. I'm doing that a lot. My research is about learning analytics. I'm predicting the learning path to assist student in learning. So I just collecting all the learning paths of my student who got A in my class programming course. Then I formulate the steps of learning path. Then I share to my student, if you want to get A in my class, this is the learning path that you should follow, because based on the analysis that I run, 80% of it accurate, so try it. Okay, then whether it works or not, I try to reflect it. Yes, some of the students, when they reflect the learning path that are given to them, they end to A minus and A and so on. So this is where an action where technology can assist teaching and learning. I think that's all my sharing. Just the last words, as what had been mentioned of Tim Browns, the president of IDO. Design thinking is a human-centered and collaborative approach to problem solving using a design mindset to solve complex problems. So thank you very much. I stopped sharing my screen so that I will try to answer some questions from chats, or might be anyone would like to on the speaker would like to ask. Then I will feel free to ask, and I would love to answer it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. We have one question from Sister Chong. Hi, Prof. How do we design thinking to enhance student learning experience in teaching clinical skills?
Okay. As I did mention that if you talk about design thinking totally, yes, it really, sometimes you, as an instructor, we feel blur. How can we use it in our class? But when we talk about design thinking, it's actually overlapping with problem-based learning, project-based learning. So that is where you can use problem-based learning methods in teaching the clinical skill. What you have to do is that you have to give a real world problem to the student. But then, as I did mention, problem-based learning is not covering 100% of design thinking. Okay, so what we need to do is that we have to inject a little bit, few phases. What I did is that I formulate the problem based on problem-based learning criteria, but I bring the problem into 5 phases of design thinking. So Dr. Chong, what you can do is that design the problem, the real world problem related to clinical skill, which actually you are the one who know if the student able to solve this problem, okay, through a design thinking phases, they will learn this, the clinical skills that you before this, or might be I before this, give direct instruction to the student. So this is where what I can actually give tips to you, and produce and problem-based learning. Actually, if you read an articles about problem-based learning, it's by David Barrows. It had been implemented first in medical. Problem-based learning has been implemented first in medical area, not in other area. So this is where the one that I can give tips is that use problem-based learning to formulate the problem, but use 5 phases of design thinking as the phases the student will go through to solve the problem. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Prof. Chong here. Yeah, thank you for your suggestion. Because one of the things that definitely problem-based learning in IMU is doing a lot of like clinical cases, but right now we are looking at some things like a skill-based, like how to draw blood, for example.
Okay.
Like that is the skill-based is having a processes, like you need to teach them. And but one of the things that you are suggesting, talking about scenario, it may be, what do you think using a scenario will be helpful in terms of student learning on that particular, like for example, like just talking about blood drawing, how to draw blood from a patient or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. If you're talking about scenario, yes, of course, problem-based learning is actually, you must have a scenario, but usually problem-based learning, the scenario is not a current scenario, it's not a contemporary issue. So, but in design thinking, it must be a contemporary issue, it must be current scenario, it must be with data, with everything, a complete scenario. It's not just an imagination to bring the student to the not realistic scenario. So for example, before this, I did it a lot also. Before this, when I implement the problem-based learning, I ask the student to imagine you are in the room where you have this and so on. But in design thinking, the scenario must be complete with data, with the situation, with the result, and it must be contemporary and also real life and current scenario. So what you can do is that to formulate this scenario, you need help from others, from your friends also in the clinicals area. What are the any scenario that you can use so that your class will see that they are trying to solve the real scenario. Okay, that is what I suggest. Okay. For example, I did in my class, when Malaysian airline will be shut down, and will be shut out because of might be due to not so many actually buy we call it Malaysian airline flight tickets. They focus on Asia before COVID. I believe there is an articles by our former Prime Minister Tun Mahathir to shut down the Malaysian airline. So what I did is that I take that articles, and at that time, I'm actually teaching programming. I'm not teaching management. So I take the real scenario with all the Tun Mahathir pictures from the newspaper cutting. I cut it. The newspaper cutting has been released 2 days before my class. Then I put it in my class. I say that, okay, what do you think about this issue that been posted by our Prime Minister? They say that this is not correct, and so on. So I say, okay, how can we try to rebut on this and try to give response to our Prime Minister? Government should not shut down Malaysian Airlines. So then they come up saying, Prof, we have to ask all the frequent flyers of Malaysian Airlines. And how can we get data? And then they say, why not doing online poll? Because my subject is about programming. They need to develop online polling system. Then I say, okay, why not we produce an online poll? Then you have to go to the root of the problem, why Malaysian airline is going to be shut down. And then this is where the design thinking take place. They have to empathize, they have to define, they have to ideate, and so on. Okay, so try to be creative as much as we can in teaching. Okay, thank you. I hope I answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Dr. Zaidatun Tasir, for a most interesting talk and sharing your vast knowledge in design thinking to transform learning experience. I am sure that all the participants benefited from the session.